In a move that, honestly, shocked the world, former US President Donald Trump launched a trade war against Canada. Trump slapped tariffs on a range of Canadian goods entering the United States. He claimed these tariffs were needed to protect American jobs and businesses. Canada was, well, stunned. The two countries had always been close allies and trading partners. This aggressive action by the US marked a turning point in their relationship. Tariffs are essentially taxes imposed on goods imported from another country. But they're not just any ordinary tax. Tariffs are a powerful tool that governments use to influence international trade, protect domestic industries, and sometimes to send a political message. When a country places a tariff on imported goods, it's making a deliberate choice to raise the cost of those goods as they enter the country. This can have far-reaching effects not just on the price tags in stores but on the entire relationship between trading partners. For everyday consumers, the impact of tariffs is felt most directly at the checkout counter. Imported products, whether it's cheese from Canada, electronics from Asia, or cars from Europe, suddenly become more expensive. Retailers and businesses often pass these extra costs onto shoppers, leading to higher prices for the same goods. This means that families might have to think twice before buying their favorite imported snacks, or that a small business owner might struggle to keep up with rising expenses. Over time, these price increases can add up, affecting household budgets and even changing the way people shop. When President Trump introduced tariffs on Canadian products, his goal was clear: make Canadian goods less attractive to American buyers. By increasing the cost of these imports, he hoped that American consumers and businesses would turn to products made in the USA instead. This, in theory, would boost American manufacturing and create jobs at home. But the reality is often more complicated. Many American companies rely on Canadian materials and products to keep their own businesses running smoothly. So when tariffs make those imports more expensive, it can actually hurt the very industries they're meant to protect. Trump's strategy was to use tariffs as leverage in trade negotiations, hoping that the economic pressure would force Canada to agree to new terms that favored the United States. However, history has shown that tariffs can backfire. Instead of bringing trading partners to the negotiating table, they can spark retaliation. Countries hit with tariffs often respond by imposing their own taxes on American goods, escalating tensions, and leading to what's known as a trade war. This tit-for-tat approach can disrupt global supply chains, create uncertainty for businesses, and ultimately hurt workers and consumers on both sides of the border. The consequences of tariffs ripple through the economy. Shoppers face higher prices, families see their grocery bills climb, and small businesses struggle to absorb the extra costs. Even industries that are supposed to benefit from tariffs can find themselves caught in the crossfire, as their own supply chains become more expensive and less reliable. In the end, the burden of tariffs is often shared by everyone, not just the countries targeted by the policy. Despite these risks, President Trump was willing to gamble on tariffs in his pursuit of what he saw as fairer trade deals. He believed that tough tactics were necessary to protect American interests and level the playing field. Whether or not tariffs achieve their intended goals, one thing is clear: they are a weaponized tax capable of reshaping economies, straining international relationships, and impacting the lives of millions of people, often in ways that are impossible to predict. Canada refused to be bullied. When tensions between the United States and Canada reached a boiling point over trade disputes, many wondered how Canada would respond to mounting pressure from its southern neighbor. The world watched as the Canadian government stood firm, determined not to back down in the face of aggressive tactics. The border crossings, usually symbols of friendship and cooperation, now became the front lines of a growing economic standoff. Canadian officials made it clear they would not simply accept unfair treatment or one-sided policies. Instead, they began to consider their own options for retaliation, determined to protect their national interests and send a strong message to Washington. In a bold move, the Canadian province of British Columbia announced it would fight back. The provincial government, led by a coalition of determined leaders, convened emergency meetings to discuss their response. The mood was resolute. British Columbia would not stand idly by while its economy and its people were threatened. The press conference was packed with reporters, all eager to hear what steps the province would take. The announcement was met with both surprise and admiration across the country, as British Columbia positioned itself at the forefront of Canada's response to the escalating trade conflict. Their weapon of choice? Tolls. But not just any tolls. These would be targeted, strategic, and designed to hit where it hurt most. The idea was simple, yet powerful. By imposing tolls on American trucks traveling through British Columbia, the province could directly impact the flow of goods between the continental United States and Alaska. This was a calculated move, one that would force American businesses and politicians to feel the consequences of the trade dispute in a very real way. The toll booths, usually just a minor inconvenience for drivers, suddenly became symbols of resistance and leverage in a much larger battle. BC Premier David Eby revealed a plan to place tolls on American trucks using the Alaska Highway. Standing at the podium, Premier Eby outlined the details of the new policy, emphasizing that it was not a decision made lightly. He explained that the tolls would apply specifically to commercial vehicles registered in the United States, ensuring that the impact would be felt by those most closely tied to the trade dispute. The Premier stressed that British Columbia remained committed to fair trade and good relations with its neighbors, but that it could not allow its own interests to be undermined without a response. The announcement sent shockwaves through both Canadian and American business communities, as companies scrambled to assess the potential impact on their supply chains. This vital route runs through BC and is a lifeline for getting goods to and from the U.S. state of Alaska. The Alaska Highway, stretching over 1,300 miles from Dawson Creek, British Columbia to Delta Junction, Alaska, is more than just a road. It's a critical artery for commerce, tourism, and the daily lives of thousands of people. Every year, millions of dollars worth of goods travel this route, making it essential for both American and Canadian businesses. By targeting this highway, British Columbia was leveraging one of its most important assets, knowing that any disruption here would be felt far beyond its own borders. The move underscored just how interconnected the two countries' economies had become, and how actions on one side of the border could have ripple effects across the continent. The tolls were strategically aimed at applying pressure right back on the U.S. By making it more expensive for American trucks to use the Alaska Highway, British Columbia hoped to encourage American leaders to reconsider their approach to trade negotiations. The province calculated that the added costs would quickly add up for American companies, potentially leading to higher prices for consumers and increased pressure on politicians to find a resolution. The sight of long lines of trucks at the toll booths became a daily reminder of the ongoing dispute, as drivers and businesses alike voiced their frustrations. For many, the tolls were a necessary measure, a way to level the playing field and ensure that Canada's voice was heard. It was a clear message: this trade war was going to hurt both sides. The imposition of tolls on the Alaska Highway marked a turning point in the conflict, signaling that Canada was prepared to stand up for itself, even if it meant short-term pain for both countries. The empty highways and tense border crossings served as stark reminders of the stakes involved. As negotiations continued behind closed doors, the world watched to see who would blink first. One thing was certain: the era of quiet cooperation had given way to a new, more confrontational chapter in the relationship between Canada and the United States. The impact of British Columbia's newly imposed tolls was felt far beyond the border itself. What began as a policy decision in Canada quickly rippled across the international boundary, sending shockwaves through communities that depended on the free flow of goods. The border, once a routine checkpoint for thousands of trucks each week, suddenly became a bottleneck, with every shipment now carrying an extra cost. In Alaska, alarm bells started ringing almost immediately. State officials, business leaders, and everyday citizens watched with growing concern as the situation unfolded. The government convened emergency meetings, poring over data and projections to understand just how deeply these tolls would affect the state's fragile supply chain. For a region already accustomed to logistical challenges, this new hurdle threatened to tip the balance. The state of Alaska relies heavily on the Alaska Highway, a vital artery that connects it to the rest of North America. This highway is more than just a road, it's a lifeline. Every day, convoys of trucks make the long journey, braving harsh weather and remote stretches, to deliver the goods that keep Alaskan communities running. Without this route, the state would be cut off from essential supplies. Everything from food and fresh produce to fuel for heating and transportation, to construction materials for homes and businesses, travels this route. The tolls imposed by British Columbia meant that every single item crossing the border now came with an added expense. For suppliers, these costs quickly added up, forcing them to make tough decisions about what to ship, how much to order, and how to pass on the costs. The effects were soon visible on store shelves across Alaska. With tolls adding extra costs to transportation, prices for essential goods in Alaska began to rise sharply. Grocery stores struggled to keep their shelves stocked, and when products did arrive, they often came with higher price tags. Items that were once taken for granted, fresh fruit, milk, bread, became more expensive and sometimes harder to find. Businesses faced delays in getting their products. Shipments that once arrived on schedule were now held up at the border, waiting for paperwork and payment of new fees. Small business owners, already operating on thin margins, found themselves squeezed by both higher costs and unpredictable delivery times. Some were forced to reduce their orders, while others worried about how long they could stay afloat. Consumers, too, felt the pinch. Shoppers found themselves paying more for everyday items, stretching their budgets further each week. For many families, the rising costs meant making difficult choices, cutting back on non-essentials, buying less, or seeking out alternatives. The frustration was palpable in checkout lines as people compared prices and wondered how much worse things might get. The trade war was no longer an abstract political battle. It was hitting people in their wallets and in their daily lives. For Alaskans, the consequences of distant policy decisions had become all too real, manifesting in higher prices, empty shelves, and a growing sense of uncertainty about the future. The question on everyone's mind: how long could this go on, and what would it take to bring relief? Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood firm against Trump's pressure. He condemned the tariffs as unfair and harmful to both countries. Trudeau rallied Canadians behind him, emphasizing the importance of standing up for their interests. Canada also sought international support, challenging the tariffs through the World Trade Organization. Trudeau's message was clear: Canada was willing to negotiate, but not under the threat of economic bullying. The trade war put a significant strain on US-Canada relations. The two countries, once the best of friends and partners, found themselves locked in a bitter economic battle. The dispute highlighted the fragility of international relations, even between close allies. The trade war raised questions about the future of the US-Canada relationship. Would they be able to repair the damage and return to a place of mutual trust and cooperation? Only time would tell. The US-Canada trade war was a stark reminder of the growing trend of economic warfare. In today's interconnected world, countries are increasingly using tariffs, tolls, and other economic measures as weapons to achieve their goals. This new age of economic warfare creates uncertainty and instability in the global economy. Businesses and consumers alike are left to navigate a complex web of trade barriers and shifting alliances. In a world where global events can have a direct impact on our lives, staying informed is more important than ever. By understanding issues like trade wars, we can make informed decisions and hold our leaders accountable. Whether it's through reputable news sources, educational resources, or engaging in thoughtful discussions, knowledge empowers us to navigate the complexities of our interconnected world. So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.